So today, what we're going to be doing is sort of continuing our trend of discussing, increasingly serious topics. And so this week, what we're talking about are issues of worker mobility, emigration, and immigration. Okay, and so we've talked about this to an extent in a previous lecture where we talked about people sort of moving around within a labor market. But there, what we were talking about is sort of, like a nurse in New York moving to, California or some other state in the U.S. And so this week, we're taking on sort of a global perspective, talking about the flow of workers, across national borders. So on the one side of this issue is the idea that borders, realistically, are nothing more than what we could call social constructs, as they reflect sort of the bargaining between countries over where like the line between them gets drawn, right? Typically, there's very little in the way of like a natural border. So some places, have rivers or whatever, or like a body of water between them, right? But there's nothing that like intuitively says that something on this side of the water should be one country and something on that side of the water should be a different country, right? And so, so where that line gets drawn is at some level an extremely arbitrary thing, okay? And so if they're arbitrary, then realistically, at least on this side of the debate, is that they shouldn't matter, right? If someone is willing to work for a specific wage, why would it matter, where they came from? There doesn't seem to be any issue with people who live in, Ohio that come up and work in Detroit. But when we talk about people from Canada coming across the bridge and working in Detroit, somehow this is a much bigger issue for no reason other than the fact that Canada is a different country than the U.S., right? But really, there doesn't seem to be much of a difference between someone from Ohio and someone from Canada working in Detroit. On the other side, though, is the fact that this is immigration, right? People moving between countries is immigration, and that this may affect labor markets, in our case, in the U.S. And so over the last several decades, the number of people crossing the border has actually increased dramatically, right? Typically, these people come from a country that is poorer and work in a wealthier country. They speak different languages, they hold different cultural beliefs, and may have completely different value systems than the native citizens. And so this has led to some people calling for tighter border security by proposing stricter limits on immigration, perhaps even expelling immigrants without, any sort of without worrying about, in the context of the presidential debates. Donald Trump is clearly calling for, getting everyone out, all the undocumented immigrants out of America, right? And the typical argument here is that these immigrant workers lower the wages of native citizens. They impose financial burdens on the host country in the form of welfare programs and such, and may even increase crime rates. Okay? And so we're going to explore these topics through the lens of economics, trying to figure out what conditions lead people to decide to emigrate or leave their country to enter another, what conditions lead them to choose to do so legally versus illegally, and what effects these have on the country that they choose to emigrate to, both in terms of the labor market for the native citizens, as well as the financial burdens that they place on the host country. Now, most of the current research on this front comes from studying the border between the U.S. and Mexico, as well as the situation in Europe. So I'll be focusing on these two situations, but only because, that's where the research is, not because it's in any way special. Because of the vast amount of research on this topic that is freely available online, I'm also going to put lots of links up on Blackboard for you to read as well.